Hello and welcome again to Kaleidoscope. My name is Trip Wrigley and I'm your host. And today I've got my dear friend, Mr. Raleigh Yielding, who is a luthier. Is that right?
That's right.
Did I pronounce that right? I said it right. Hey, yay me.
L-U-T-H-I-E-R for those who are concerned.
Thank you, Raleigh. I appreciate that. Raleigh builds guitars, and he builds mighty fine guitars. He built me a guitar about 4 or 5 years ago, which I have been playing, and thousands of people have played at my open mic nights. I think they're some of the finest instruments that I've ever played or seen anywhere. And today we're going to talk a little bit about the building of the guitars and the process that he goes through. Raleigh, let's start off with, Raleigh, where are you from? I know where you're from, but everybody else doesn't.
I'll bet you don't know where I'm from.
I thought you were from Birmingham.
No, I'm from Washington, D.C.
Washington,
I know. It seems kind of odd, doesn't it? I'm a Yankee. Actually, my dad went up there for about 3 years for a job, and I just happened to be born there. And then, of course, I came back down to where the best place to live, Alabama, Birmingham. Which is where we know each other
That's
from.
where we know each other from. So when did you come down here from Birmingham?
I came down in about 1980 for college, and I just never could afford to leave.
Where did you go to college? Where?
Auburn.
That's
right
what I
down
thought.
the road.
That's what I thought. That's what I thought. And when did you start getting into building guitar? I know you've been playing for a long time, because we have mutual friends that you went to high school with.
But I didn't play then.
Oh, you didn't play then?
No, when I was 28, I had some time on my hand, and I decided I'd like to learn how to play guitar. And I bought an old guitar, and the bridge was coming up on it.
Right.
And everybody said, "Oh, take it to Mac, take it to Mac, take it to Mac." So, you know, a couple of guys at the music store directed me on how to find his shop.
Mac McCormick.
Mac McCormick,
right.
yeah.
Right.
And I took him the guitar. I walked in, and his shop was almost as messy as mine. And I went in, and there were all these crushed out home-rolled cigarettes and wood shavings on the floor. And the minute I saw it, I said, I'm going to learn how to do this.
Wow.
And I spent the next 20-something years learning how to do it.
Really? I mean, did you just how did you approach Mac to get started? Because I mean, I had a lot of people that know a craft such as yours. It's kind of hard to get them to open up a little bit, especially to allow somebody in to learn the craft. How did that come about?
You know, the stories that I hear is that Mac was very private about his skills and his abilities.
That's what I've heard also.
But I never approached him to learn how to build. I just learned how to build on my own, and I hung out with him. And he was more like a dad. Right. And I would go in there 2, 3, 4 times a week and just hang out. And we had this ritual where I'd walk in, and I would start to roll a cigarette, because I never could get that right. He could roll one with one hand. So I'd get it started, and I'd hand it to him, and he'd fix it and hand it back to me, and I'd lick it and smoke a cigarette. That was our ritual. But we would hang out, and we never really talked about guitar building, but I was just around it. We would talk about just the stuff that was on the news, and you know, people that we knew, and of course you were there every time. I don't know how he got anything done. I mean, I'm out in the country, so I have a lot of privacy and can work. But it was a constant flow all day long in Mac's shop. He was there about 15 hours a day, because he'd get there early.
Wasn't this over in Phoenix City?
Yeah. Well, no, it was over in Alabama. I mean, in Columbus. You cross the bridge over the viaduct, but it was just a constant flow of just the who's who in Columbus music, and people from far away. People would drive. You'd be there on the phone. It was always the same phone call. He'd pick it up and he'd say, "Yeah," and he'd try to talk him in. You know, and people would get lost. They'd call back a few minutes later, but people from all over the place would come and let Mac work on it.
So when was your first guitar? When did you build your first guitar on your own? And when you built it, did you build it in parts and take it to Mac, or did you build it pieces and call Mac and say, "Okay, I've got to here"? Or
no,
how did that come about?
I didn't even tell him that I was going to do it. I got every book I could find.
Right.
It was hard back then to find information on guitar building.
Yeah.
And now,
of course,
you can go to YouTube.
Exactly.
And there are guys telling how to do it all the time.
Right.
But back then it was pretty tough. So I built the first instrument. That was probably 1990, somewhere around in there. And of course, it was horrible. And I took it to Mac and I said, "What do you think?" And he'd look at it and he said, "Well, you could have done this different or this different. And it sounds good, but you know, cosmetically they were pretty rough." I still have the first one I ever built.
Did you? I was about that. And so, I mean, my guitar is number 83.
Right.
I believe it. And it doesn't have any serial numbers or anything like that on it, but you look inside and it has etched out.
Right. Pencil, probably.
Right, pencil. Number 83.
Right, that's the serial number.
Right. So
this is number 116, I believe.
116.
Yeah.
Right. No kidding. That's all. I figured you'd built a lot more than that. How many have you built?
106. Well, the first 4 or 5 didn't have numbers, but
oh, I see.
You know, about 120 instruments.
Right. Well, you want to talk with us a little bit about the process of picking out your wood and the differences in the wood and the difference. I know that the wood that you pick out makes the guitar, right?
Yeah, to some extent that's true. There's a lot of a lot of argument about what's the best wood.
Yeah, I've heard that too.
Years ago, all your really high quality guitars were built with Brazilian rosewood, which you can't get anymore because they used it all. I've got a few pieces of that. And if somebody wants a Brazilian rosewood guitar, I'll make them one.
Right.
But it's still pretty challenging to get that wood now. Now, at that time, it was available.
Right.
But I don't even like Brazilian rosewood. I would disagree with people. The finest guitar wood that I've ever used is what your guitar's built out of.
The rosewood,
cherry.
that Madagascar. Well, you also use the...
It's got Madagascar rosewood for the fingerboard. You have to use a really hard wood for your fingerboard and the bridge.
Right.
And on yours, that's Madagascar rosewood.
Right.
But cherry is the best that I've used for back and sides. But like back behind you, there's a big piece of black walnut right here. This is a piece of curly maple right over here. There's some more curly maple. Because I'm an American and I like to use domestic woods. All of those woods, the black walnut grew in a tree just right down the road.
Wow.
And I don't cut a standing.
So this is what you would use the back and the sides for.
Yes.
And the tops?
Spruce.
That's what I found with most guitars is the tops are built with spruce. Why spruce?
Because it's very light and very strong. And it's very straight grained. And originally they could split those into billets because originally they came from violins, and those are split so that it's perfectly quarter sawn. And I don't know if it was probably because it was easier to work that way, because you didn't have to have a saw. You could just split it in billets, and then shape it down with hand tools. But now, and plus, if it's quarter sawn, wood shrinks and expands more around the tree, the circumference of the tree, instead of from the middle to the outside. It's very stable that way, so it's not subject to the influences of humidity and such and heat. Yeah. So that's probably why it started. And spruce is very easy to split; just splits like butter. Right. But it's also extremely strong for the weight that it is, and so the top needs to be lightweight enough to move with the vibrations of the strings, and strong enough to maintain its shape over time. And if you look, every good guitar pulls up. If it's not overbuilt and really heavy, it'll pull up on the back side of the bridge. And well, this is a mandolin, but I can show you on this. It'll pull up. The bridge would be here, and it'll pull up some here. But you don't want this to ever sink in here. Right. And that's why you want something strong like spruce, because on a guitar there's 120 something pounds of pressure on the neck, all just constantly pulling like this.
Right, once it's strung, you mean?
Right. So it's a real engineering feat to hold that much tension and not just self-destruct.
Right, or not just fold up.
The second or third guitar I built completely self-destructed in about a day.
Really?
Yeah, and it met with a tree outside. Because I had all these opinions about, I could do this or that, you know. Right. But the truth is, the guys who worked this stuff out, this was worked out over hundreds of years.
All right, we're going to take a real quick short break. Be right back with my guest, Mr. Riley Yielding. We're getting into a little more detail about building guitars. We'll be back momentarily. Welcome back to Kaleidoscope. My name is Trip Wrigley, and my guest today is Mr. Riley Yielding. And we're going to get Riley now to get in a little more depth with this. Riley, why don't you do a little more explaining about the first steps of making a guitar and what you're doing, what you do.
Well, we talked about wood selection. This is a piece of quarter sawn cherry, and you can see it's really thin. This is probably about 1/10 of an inch thick.
Right.
And of course, this was straight when I started, sawn and sanded, and then you soak it for a little bit in water, and then if you soak wood and you get it hot, it steams the wood fibers and it'll make them pliable so that you can bend them. And so some people do this in this big contraption that's more like a machine. I hand bend everything. So you'll just work the wood on, this would be hot.
And that's your steamer then.
Right. When I first did this, I got a brass artillery shell out at Fort Benning, and I used to shoot propane flame into it. It was about 4 inches in diameter, and I'd get black all over my face from the propane. And I finally, they came up with these little electronic benders, and they maintain the perfect temperature.
So that's just clamped to your table?
This is just clamped to my table. It has a
plugs in?
rheostat,
right?
So you can get just the perfect temperature. And then you just slowly work it on that hot metal, and it'll the whole time. And you know, and it takes a while because it'll bend easily, but to get it bent into the right shape, you need to clamp it into a mold. So as it's bending, I'll put it in a mold, half of a mold.
I see. So once you've got it hot and it's wet.
Right, it's more pliable. Now it takes a while to get it to so it'll even fit in the mold so that you can work with it.
Right.
But then at that time I'll take the mold apart and I'll just be working one half at a time, and you can hold the wood as you're bending and get it to match this contour perfectly. Now it's still hot, so when if you were to do that and then not clamp it in a mold, it would straighten some, it would bend, it would spring back a little bit. So as you're working, you'll clamp it into the mold so that it keeps that shape. So you'll work the whole side and then the other side, and then when you're finished, you'll have two sides in a mold like this. And you can see that just fits perfectly. Now it's somewhat rigid, so if you take it out of the mold, it'll hold its shape. Right. But you can't trust that because it will spring back, and then by the time you get the top all glued up, it will have sprung back and the top won't fit it. So you clamp the top on in the mold. And so while it's in the mold, you have to glue an end block down here, a neck block up here, and there's thin kerfed wood that most people use that you glue here to give extra glue surface to the top. What I do, instead of using kerfed wood, because I don't like those slots in there, I'll steam bend little thin layers of wood. Usually I use either 2 or 3 layers depending on if there's going to be pearl or not, because you have when you do a decorative work on the outside, you route in. So if you route in, you might route past this.
So are these two pieces right here overlapped?
They're overlapped right now because they haven't been
right, but
trimmed
I'm saying
yet.
you trim them off.
They'll be butt flush perfectly together with.
And are they glued when they're butt flushed?
No, the block that you put glues everything together.
I see.
So it'll be overlapped with a block on each end, and then you'll have your linings in here. And when you're done with that, then you're ready to glue the top on.
Right. Okay. And so what's next, Riley?
Well, next, after you get the sides bent and all the linings in and the end block in, you would get a top. Now, this is a back and not a top. This is made out of sycamore, but for illustrative purposes, it'll work just fine. This is sawn down to about 1/8 of an inch thick. It'll be sanded much more when it's all finished.
Right.
But this is a good rough dimension to start with. And you'll sketch out the shape of the guitar on the top, and then you put braces on it. This is glued. This is a piece of either spruce or cedar or something like that.
Braces actually make the guitar.
Absolutely. That's why it depends on the kind of guitar you're making when you select it, but it's about that kind of dimension. And this will be glued on the guitar either in an X brace or a ladder brace, depending on the type of guitar you're going to make. And it's glued on there square, but if you look inside most quality guitars will have what's called scalloping. And right next to where the edge of the guitar is, it's carved down. And I didn't even know how that was done when I started. I used to shape all my braces with all the scalloping and everything and then glue them down.
Right.
But the way it was done is they would put them on square, and then you would use a sharp chisel to shape your, and that is everything on the guitar. There is a world in brace scalloping. It's either going to sound horrible or it's going to sound good, and everything depends upon that. So you glue that down, and when you're done and you cut the shape out, then you have to notch that into the top of the top side of the sides, so it creates a sandwich.
Right.
After that, you'll end up with something that would look like this, back and sides all glued together. After that, you have to do whatever decorative adornments you want on this. This has wooden binding, 2 thin layers for contrast. Sometimes you'll put pearl in here, and same thing around the sound hole. And then on my guitars, I do a hand cut dovetail. Now, most factory guitars are just bolted on, which is
Right.
fine. There's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
In fact, in many ways, it's easier if you ever need to do a repair, because then the only glue you have to worry about is under the tongue
Right.
of the neck.
Do you use truss bars in your guitar?
I do. I use a solid 3/8 inch by 1/4 inch key stock, but it's not adjustable.
Right.
I think
Right.
putting an adjustable truss rod in a guitar is a bad idea, and
Why?
I'll get all kind of controversy over that.
Really? But why do you say
Well,
that?
the first reason is, if there's something to be adjusted, somebody's going to try to adjust it. And I've got a whole pile of truss rods over there that I've taken out of broken necks
Right.
and had to replace. So what I do instead is I put that right there in there. Now, you could clamp this in a vise on top of this and stand on it, and that won't bend. It's extremely strong metal.
Really?
So you have to work out, if you want a what's called recurve in your neck, you have to work all that out when you're building it. But once it's built, that neck will be stable forever. That's what I choose. Now, if somebody wants an adjustable truss rod,
Right.
I won't be responsible for it, but I'll be glad to put it in.
I've had no problem whatsoever with my guitar. As far as every other guitar I've always had, you've always had, every once in a while I have to go get the neck adjusted and the truss bar. I've never had a problem with mine whatsoever.
No need for that with these.
No.
And also, every guitar that I build, I put this thin strip of veneer on the top and on the back side of the neck, because that's where they break. Every one that I've ever fixed is just breaks right in here, because the grain goes straight, but this bends. So they'll just snap right off there. But this strengthens that up. And in every one of the
That's
heels,
I have the same on mine. I thought it was just decorative. I didn't.
You know that when years ago Mac was repairing some, and the repair on that is to glue the neck back and then slice off a piece and put some matching wood.
Right.
But
right.
it doesn't always work out to be perfectly matching. So sometimes there was a contrast, and I remember looking at it and saying, "God, Mac, that's really pretty. I'm going to do mine like that from now on."
Yeah.
So I do the repair before it breaks. I also put a dowel pin through the heel, so that, because this also breaks, and that strengthens up this right here. Right. So you cut your dovetail, and it takes a long time to hand cut a dovetail, because this has to fit in there perfectly with no space at all.
And what are you hand cutting it with when you're hand cutting it?
A chisel and a
chisel and a hammer.
Yeah, a chisel and one of these right here. That's called a mallet. I made that out of dogwood, so it's really, really hard. But if your chisel's sharp, most of what you do is just push it through the wood.
I
You're a cabinet worker.
work with wood myself. I'm a cabinet maker at times.
Yeah, my granddaddy always said every second that you spend sharpening a chisel is worth it.
Yes, I agree. There's nothing worse than a dull chisel.
Right.
It's like
and nothing more dangerous.
Yeah, exactly. Nothing more dangerous, for sure.
So there's a lot of precision in that, especially on this cutaway. When you're finished, all of these have to be flush. This is your last chance to get everything straight in here. But when it's done, it would essentially, it's hard. You couldn't pull this out this way.
Right.
It's locked in there. So just a little bit of glue right here and a little bit of glue right here locks it in tight, and then you end up with a guitar. Now that it's not finished,
right?
But because there's still, when you put finish on a guitar, like you can look at this and it's not perfectly flat. This has finish on it, but this will have to be hand polished.
Oh, definitely.
And it can't be polished for a month after you put the finish on, because it has to be really, really hard. So because what you do is you sand it, micro sand it, perfectly flat, sort of like automotive
finish. What kind of finish are you using then?
I shoot mostly lacquer. I've used varnish before as well. Violins and old school mandolins were made with varnish, but
does that affect the sound?
It does.
What you use?
Yeah, and also how you put it on. What I always say is you spray on 15 coats and you sand off 14 coats.
That's funny, because when I build a cabinet, we'll spray, it'll dry, we'll sand, we'll spray, it'll dry. I mean, it's
over
several
and over
several.
Yeah.
It's quite the process.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that you would let it. Why would you let it sit so long before?
Because if you don't, if you look at the surface of this, it has what's called orange peel on it.
Right.
First of all, it sinks in. It takes that long to cure, so as it's curing, it's drawing in, and you can see these dimples.
Right.
And that's called orange peel.
I see.
So even like if we sprayed this and spent hours and hours sanding it and polishing it, then it would do that again.
Right.
So you don't want to have to polish it more than one time.
I see.
Plus, you have to have a point of reference in sanding so that you don't spray through the finish. And if you don't do that all at one time, you'll get into trouble, especially if it's got color. Like these are sunbursts.
Right.
And if you sand into this color, then you get to start all over again.
Right, exactly.
You get to strip the whole guitar and start all over
So
again.
how do you choose the wood for your necks?
I either try to match the guitar wood. This guitar was cherry, so this is a cherry neck, and it's got, on this one, this fingerboard, this has got some finish on it, so it doesn't look like it matches, but this is the same. All of the binding and everything on this is just like on your guitar. The rosewood that's on your bridge, that's on your fingerboard, matches the binding, matches the overlays. So that the decorative part is just to match the bridge.
Right.
But either I use the same kind of wood, or I use a completely contrasting wood, because mahogany is a great neck wood. It's straight and strong.
Right.
I mean, cherry's plenty strong, but if you're building a guitar out of something that is not as strong, then you have to have contrast and use mahogany generally. So but even the contrast is beautiful. If you have different color woods, it's just a beautiful.
Laying the frets in. Now how's that exactly done, Riley? I mean, I have an idea of it.
So you have a miter box, just like you work with in cabinets.
Right.
And in this miter box, you very carefully measured out where the frets would be, and you saw the curve for each fret, and then you clamp all that together, because it has to be precise.
On some guitars, I noticed that there's not as many frets as there are on other guitars.
Right.
And obviously there's not a set number of frets, but as you go down the guitar, and anybody that doesn't play guitar, don't know guitar, but they get smaller, and this is your frets in between here. And if you notice, see how they get smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. Is there a certain number of frets that it has to have?
Well, what you have is you've got in the neck, you've got the nut here, and you've got the saddle somewhere down here.
Right.
So there's I think it's a logarithm. I'm not a math guy, but there's a calculation that you run where you take the overall length and you multiply this in, and it gives you the first one, and then you do the calculation, it does the second one. But all of this stuff has been worked out by people a lot smarter than me, and so you can get a fret rule. And this particular fret rule has 4 different fret lengths on it. Now this is a factory miter box. Right. I don't use this. This was some of Mac's stuff here, but this one is worked out for one type of classical guitar. But every guitar is not the same.
Right,
a Martin has 1 fret length. A Gibson has another. Classical has another one. So you have to either make or buy. This is one that I made for a baritone guitar. You either have to make or purchase a miter box for each one, and you can see it's real precise, and you have to work that out over time, because sometimes you'll make one and it doesn't the intonation is wrong.
Right.
So you got to get it perfect, and once you get it perfect, you can make over and over again.
All right, y'all, we're going to be right back, Mr. Riley Yielding, and a little bit more Kaleidoscope. Thank you very much. And we're back again with Kaleidoscope, my dear friend, Mr. Riley Yielding. Riley, so tell us, like, what type of guitars do you make all together?
I can build anything with a string on it. I have not built a fiddle yet, but it's not because I can't build one. I just haven't built one.
I know you do mandolins.
All the parts. I build the mandolins. I also build classical guitar. Here's a classical guitar, and this one is bird's eye maple with a mahogany neck. Here's one with a contrasting neck, like I talked about, because you want lightweight and strong.
So what's the difference between a classical guitar or say another guitar?
This one has nylon strings
nylon
on it.
Strings.
A wider neck.
That's what I thought too. Yeah.
It's much lighter, much so that because you could not resonate these nylon strings with a heavy guitar.
So how many guitars did you say you've made so far?
Oh, I'm right around 120 or so.
And what would be your first one?
That's this one right here. I played this one for years and years. This one, it's rough as a cob, as Mac used to say. This was just a spruce 2x4 from the hardware store. You can even see the glue lines where I just sawed it up into slivers, you know, and glued it back together. It's got a poplar back from a poplar tree I just sawed off down here at the farm. It's got walnut binding on it. It's just as rough as it could be. It has a walnut fingerboard.
What's the signature right there?
There's Willie Nelson's signature.
Mr. Willie.
When he played down here at the River Center years ago. And of course, it used to, Willie would sign everything, including body parts, but it had gotten to where they were pretty protective of Willie. So it was hard to get into the green room, you know, after the show was over. And I went up to him, and I've got a picture somewhere. He's tiny. He's standing next to me. And I remember I said, I'm a guitar builder. I'd be happy to fix that hole in your guitar. And he just grinned, and he said, every guitar builder says that. But I got him to sign it right there. That's number one right there.
That's great. That's great.
But I also, like I said, I build all kind of shapes and sizes. This is very similar, actually. That may be the same mold. And this is, you can see it's a little bit more finely detailed than they were back then. This doesn't have a lot of, in fact, doesn't have any mother of pearl on it, but you know.
This is beautiful. What is, I've never seen a guitar with that kind of.
That's a nice comfy armrest.
Really? Huh.
Should I play a song on it?
Play us a little bit. I'll give us a little bit of something.
I just wrote this one. I'm not saying you made me blue. The blues found me long before I found you. Still it's true, you remind me of the blues. I'm not saying you've done me wrong. That's not the reason why I wrote this song. Still it's true, you remind me of the blues. I'm the man that makes these moves to repeat the past. A broken record with some deep, deep grooves, and you're the needle on the phonograph. But I'm not saying you made me blue. The blues found me long before I found you. Still it's true, you remind me of the blues. Still it's true, you remind me of the blues.
Great song, Riley. Great song. Beautiful guitar too. Well, give us a real quick. What are your price ranges?
A really nice guitar with a gloss finish and nice woods is about $3,000. If you want to pick up, put in it, just the price of the pickup is all it's going to cost.
And you normally use Fishman's, right?
This one has what's called a Matrix Fishman Infinity, which gives you tone and volume in the sound hole, a preamp, so that you have a strong signal to the sound man, which is really important. If a lot of people have guitars that are not preamp, and it's a nightmare for the sound man.
I get through that a lot. I run several open mic nights in town, and when I play my guitar or someone else plays my guitar, the difference is just it's remarkable compared to any guitar, any acoustic guitars I hear. Nothing sounds like my Riley guitar. Nothing has the output of it, and I think it has a lot to do with the electronics that you put in it and everything. But
I can also do a satin finish. Like this is a gloss finish, but a satin finish, you know, that'll take off about $500. So for $2,500, they can get a satin finish. Same, everything else the same.
Well, Riley, thank you very much for being on Kaleidoscope, my friend. It's good to see you. It's always good to see you, man. I love what you do. I love your music, and I love your guitars. I will always be a Riley Yielding fan as far as his music and his guitar. And I want to thank him once again for inviting us into his shop. And thank you all coming out and having a listen and watching Kaleidoscope. Until next time, I'm Trip Wrigley, and this is my friend, Riley Yielding.
Thank you, Trip.